Good morning. I'm Savannah Sellers. Thank you so much for starting your week with us. Joe is off this morning. We're going to begin this Monday morning with the latest on the war with Iran. President Trump is scheduled to host a news conference at the White House. That's going to be at 1 p.m. Eastern today. And while the president did not appear on camera this weekend, he did deliver several messages on his social media platform, Truth Social. First, on Saturday morning, Mr. Trump said Iran had 48 hours before, quote, all hell will rain down on Iran if they do not make a deal to end the war or open the Strait of Hormuz. Then early Sunday morning, just after midnight, the president announced that U.S. forces safely rescued the second crew member aboard the two-seat fighter jet that went down over Iran on Friday. Finally, later that morning, on Easter Sunday, President Trump ramped up his threats to attack Iran's civilian infrastructure, calling this coming Tuesday, quote, power plant day and bridge day. So this message, it was filled with expletives. He also told Iran to open the Strait of Hormuz or face, in his words, living in hell, as he seemed to cement Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern as the latest deadline for Iran to open that critical shipping passage. We have a team of correspondents and analysts in place this morning, bringing us the very latest. You can see them on your screen there. We're going to start with NBC News international correspondent Matt Bradley. He joins us from the old city of Jerusalem. Matt, good morning. President Trump indicates this 8 p.m. deadline, latest here tomorrow, to open the Strait of Hormuz. Let's talk about the current situation there in the Strait of Hormuz, Iran's control over this critical shipping passageway.
Yeah, well, just one point about that message from President Trump. Aside from all of the expletives and the threats, he's also saying that Tuesday will become the day when he will be attacking Iranian infrastructure if they don't open the Strait of Hormuz. But he mentions that it will be late Tuesday. That's the deadline, which would actually be early morning here in the Holy Land. So Wednesday would be that day. So this is a real mix-up, and it's clear that he's firing off these messages rather impetuously. So the situation here on the ground is not resembling what we've heard from the White House. We are continuing now, more than 5 weeks into this war, seeing the Iranians pelting Israel, and now, for the first time in weeks, we've seen deaths from Iranian ballistic missiles in the northern city of Haifa. 4 people have been killed. Others have been wounded. This is a situation that Israel had more or less avoided. The casualties here had been relatively low. Here in the Holy Land, here in Jerusalem, where you can see me now, this whole area should be in the middle of Holy Week, Passover. Then we had Easter, Good Friday, Good Thursday, Holy Sunday yesterday. But there's nobody here. Shopkeepers say that they're suffering, and this is because of the Israeli restrictions that come directly from this war.
Matt, tell us how Iran is responding to that message from the president that he posted in this deadline to open the Strait of Hormuz.
Well, for one thing, we have heard that there is a peace proposal that is on the table, a 48-hour truce that had been proposed by other countries and was submitted to the United States and Iran. We still haven't heard. This is the Associated Press reporting this. We still haven't heard what the Iranian response is to that. We haven't really heard much in the way of an Iranian response to President Trump's threats, but we have to put this into context. President Trump has made threats the entire time. Most of them, he's either delayed actually acting on those threats, or he's simply ignored them and seemed to have forgotten about them. So it's not something that the Iranians or really anybody in this region is probably going to be taking particularly seriously.
Matt, what can you tell us about the latest strikes overnight and this past weekend?
Yeah, I mean, this is, as I mentioned, 4 dead in northern Israel, strikes that hit all around the Gulf region. And again, those U.S. servicemen who were, both of them lost over Iran, both of them recovered alive. But this just goes to show, more than 5 weeks into this war, the Iranians are still very much capable of clapping back against the aggressors that they see in Israel and America.
All right, Matt Bradley, thank you very much. Let's now bring in NBC News political reporter Megan Leibowitz. She is in Washington with more. Megan, good morning. So let's go back to those messages from President Trump on Truth Social over the weekend. What can you tell us about the president's latest deadline here for Iran to open that Strait of Hormuz this Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern? How did that come to be? And how it fits in with what we may hear at this planned news conference this afternoon?
Yeah, good morning, Savannah. So just to give you some background here, the president has delayed his deadlines before multiple times, but in a post to Truth Social, he seemed to make it Tuesday at 8 p.m. Now, in a separate post to Truth Social earlier on Saturday morning, as you can see on your screen, he had said that Iran had 48 hours in order to make a deal before all hell will rain down on them, were his words. Now, we're also learning a bit more about what the president said is going to happen on Tuesday if Iran does not meet that deadline in order to reopen the strait. He had a post that had several expletives in it. You can see on your screen where he said that Tuesday will be power plant day and bridge day, all wrapped up in one in Iran. There will be nothing like it. He called on Iran to open the strait and said that if not, then they will be living in hell, were his words. Now, also yesterday, the president participated in about a half dozen phone interviews with various reporters. We learned a little bit more about what he says to expect if Iran does not make a deal. So he told Axios, for example, that he thinks that there's a good chance that the U.S. and Iran comes to a deal before the deadline. But he said that if the countries do not come to a deal before then, he said, if they don't make a deal, I am blowing up everything over there. So we can expect to hear more about this directly from the president when he talks with reporters today at 1 p.m. when they're expected to press him on all of these issues that you just heard about, Savannah.
Megan, also big news. We have new details here about how U.S. forces were able to rescue that second crew member aboard the F-15 fighter jet that went down over Iran on Friday. What did the president say, and what do we know about the CIA's role in that mission?
Yeah, that's right. So the president said that the military sent dozens of aircrafts in order to retrieve that second service member who the president said was injured but will be just fine. You can see on your screen what the president said about this. He called it a miraculous search and rescue operation. He also said that the U.S. previously did not discuss that first rescue mission to get that first service member out because they did not want to jeopardize the second rescue operation. Now, he said as well, we will never leave an American warfighter behind. Now, we're also learning more about the role of the CIA in getting to this rescue mission. A senior administration official had told NBC that before the CIA had actually even been able to find this service member, the CIA had launched a deception campaign inside Iran to try to spread information inside Iran that the military had already found this service member and was moving him out on the ground in order to get him out of the country. Now, while that confusion was spreading, then the CIA was actually able to find this service member inside what the administration official called a mountain crevice. Once the CIA was able to find that service member, they relayed that information onto the Pentagon and to the White House. They ultimately were able to launch that rescue operation, Savannah.
Megan, also, I do want to talk about something interesting that happened with one of these prediction markets. So Polymarket, it took down one of these markets that had allowed users to wager on when the downed service members would be rescued. These markets in general have been such a topic of conversation and even potential legislation in Washington. What can you tell us about this and how this sort of adds to that conversation?
Yeah, that's right. So that prediction market did not sit well with Congressman Seth Moulton, who's also a veteran. So he had blasted that prediction market in a post to X where he called it disgusting. Now, in response, Polymarket had responded to his post saying that they took this market down immediately as it does not meet our integrity standards. They said it should not have been posted and that they're investigating as well. Now, Congressman Moulton said in later posts he called Polymarket's integrity standards, in his words, severely lacking. And he also called on Polymarket to remove all other bets that are associated with the war in Iran, Savannah.
All right, Megan Leibowitz, thank you so much. For more analysis, let's bring in Lieutenant Colonel Danny Davis. He is a senior fellow at Defense Priorities and also host of the Daniel Davis Deep Dive. Good morning. Thank you, as always, for being with us. So we're seeing this escalating rhetoric here between President Trump and Iran's president, both sides issuing these sort of ultimatums over the Strait of Hormuz. Now, what's interesting from your perspective that we always appreciate, Danny, is you've been doing things like right now, I know, keeping an eye on the radar, tracking U.S. military aircraft activity. What do you think U.S. military escalation could look like, given that we are just hours away from this deadline where the president is promising just that, military escalation?
Well, looking at what he said, Savannah, you have to think he has to be talking about something different, because we've had, I think I've heard the latest official figure is like 30,000 targets have been attacked since we started this war here. And you see it's kind of become, in a sense, I mean, it sounds a little odd, but almost background noise now. Psychologically within Iran, they can handle that. They have foreseen that. They have prepared for that kind of bombs. And now that if you're saying, well, we're going to bring holy hell down, what can you do that's different from what you had before? And one wonders if there's possibly going to be heavier ordnance, the Moab, so-called, the mother of all bombs, one of the biggest conventional bombs that we have in our inventory. He may fly that over something and drop. That's a risky operation, though, because it can only be dropped by a C-130 or higher rated aircraft, which means it's slow and it's got to fly over the target and drop it. It's not something you can launch. So that would have a risk all of its own. But otherwise, it's unclear what you would do different, because, look, we're already running low on the JASSMs, the long-range missiles, on the Tomahawks. A lot of reports out from Axios and others that we're getting dangerously low on those. So I don't know that you would have a big spurge. And what would that accomplish if you did? Because Iran has shown that they can absorb those and continue to hold that straight and to continue to be effective as a government. So it's unclear to me, really, what could represent something of the nature he's talking about there.
I also want to ask you about this rescue mission of that U.S. airmen in Iran. We just heard from Megan on some of this, but just from a military perspective, I mean, hundreds of special operations troops and military personnel were involved, including, as we heard from Megan, the CIA. Walk us through a mission like that, how dangerous and risky it is.
Yeah, that issue about the CIA, it's a little peculiar, I'll say, because why would we need the CIA to try to locate the guy? Because every pilot has a satellite phone on him. He has a beacon on his ejection seat. So there shouldn't have been any problem to knowing where the guy was or even being able to communicate with him. So unless something happened to his communications gear, it's not clear why the CIA would have been involved with that. It's also unusual that you would have to try to rescue a pilot, 2 C-130 type aircrafts, and then 4 little birds, they call them, these smaller helicopters, to go and to have an extraction. There is some concern that there may have been an additional mission that was trying to either mask over the rescue of the WSO, the pilot, the second pilot, or maybe there was another mission entirely, and these two got conflated and they were trying to do them both. It's unclear, a lot of confusion, but I'll just tell you that many assets to get one pilot out is not common.
Considering this was the first time the U.S. lost a fighter jet in enemy fire in over 20 years, we came close to Iran taking that downed service member as a prisoner of war. What do you think that says about Iran's military capabilities at this point? I mean, do you think President Trump and Defense Secretary Hegseth have overstated at all the level of air superiority the U.S. has against Iran?
Yeah, there's no question that's been overstated. There's also no question that we have air superiority. That is clear, because there are literally hundreds of sorties flying on a regular basis, and most of them come back safely. They're able to drop their ordnance. There's no doubt about that, but it's definitely not been eliminated. This claim that we can just fly everywhere we want and it's all open, well, self-evidently, that's no longer the case, or if maybe it never was. But there's also some evidence that Iran has had some newer kind of indigenously developed anti-aircraft capabilities that are new and technologically interesting. In one hand, they're a little bit less technologically capable, but they work because we're not prepared to defend against those. So according to some special operators I've talked to here in just the last couple of days, they say they're really worried about it.
All right, Lieutenant Colonel Danny Davis, thank you as always for your time. Well, slowly but surely, we have been feeling the effects of the war in Iran here at home. The cost to fill up your car is now the highest that it has been in years. We're also seeing the impact of this conflict in other ways. For more, let's bring in Caleb Silver, Chief Business Editor at People Inc. and Editor-in-Chief of Investopedia. Caleb, as always, thank you. All right, starting on gas prices, hitting $4.11 a gallon. That is the highest we've seen in 4 years. How much higher could these go, and how much of a concern is this?
Much higher, and we're already feeling it pretty much everywhere we spend money. If you're not feeling it yet at the grocery store, you will in a couple of months. But just take it back to to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. We saw gas spike and oil spike into $145 a barrel. Gas prices held pretty firm for several months until that was resolved. So prices could definitely go higher, and they're starting to go higher in other places. You look at the direct impact, like gasoline, definitely $1 plus higher than it was a month ago. Natural gas prices up 6 or 7%. Jet fuel up 95%. Diesel fuel 49%. These bleed their way into the areas where we spend money, whether it's travel or logistics to get our goods to the United States or send them out. That's where we're feeling it.
Well, and I'm imagining that price of diesel, getting those products here, that's impacting businesses, and then potentially the price the consumer pays. What are businesses dealing with right now?
Yeah, they're dealing with the fact that they're paying higher fuel costs, and they're going to pass them on to us. We heard from Amazon saying that they're going to add a surcharge to its third-party sellers. We heard from the United States Postal Service. They're going to add a fuel surcharge starting in about 2 or 3 weeks. The other shippers as well, FedEx, UPS, anything that requires logistics, diesel fuel or jet fuel is going to add a surcharge, whether that gets passed directly to us as consumers or it's masked in some way like extra baggage fees. We're going to feel it.
Let's talk through what this could mean for interest rates. So the Federal Reserve meeting is
23 days, 6 hours and 50 minutes, but don't expect anything to happen at that
even though
meeting.
we see this potentially driving inflation.
Yeah, and we heard from Fed Chair Powell last week that this could be transitory, that T word again, or it could last for a long time. They just don't have the information to know whether or not these extra high oil prices are going to cause more inflation across consumer goods. We're going to see the CPI, the Consumer Price Index report, at the end of this week. That'll give us a little taste of it, but we really haven't felt the full effects. You're going to have to wait until midsummer until you feel these prices, but you're already starting to feel them. If you're buying airline tickets into the summer, or if you're filling up at the gas station, or even if you're buying rice at the grocery store, that's up 7 or 8%. These different commodities are going to start to trickle higher in terms of price.
All right, Caleb Silver, thank you as always. Let's get a live look outside at the plaza now as New York wakes up to blue skies after a rainy Easter weekend. Let's check in on what you can expect with your morning news now weather. There's that shot. Meteorologist Andrew Romero joins us. Hey, good morning.
Good morning, Savannah. And we do have some rain that's impacting parts of the country, not there right there in Rockefeller Plaza, but we do have some rain over here in the Gulf Coast into the Florida Peninsula. This is a slow-moving front that's going to be moving across the area during the next couple of days, bringing a lot of rainfall. We can see some rainfall this morning over here over the Gulf Coast states into the Florida Panhandle. At this moment, we're expecting this front to continue to move through, bringing some high hourly rates of rainfall, which could lead to some flash flooding. So we have some concerns for those weather conditions in that region. We also are expecting this strong easterly flow to continue to develop across the area, pushing all that water into the Atlantic coast. So beachgoers, spring breakers, you have to be careful. We're expecting dangerous rip current conditions as well as that high surf. As far as the rainfall forecast through Wednesday, we're talking about locally 5 inches plus of rainfall that could fall here from Daytona Beach into Melbourne, even into West Palm Beach, and even into Miami. We can have those heavy downpours impacting area. Of course, it is beneficial rainfall if we're considering the drought conditions, because nearly 80% of Florida is in extreme drought at this moment. Meanwhile, in the northern tier of the country, we do have some early April snow with a weak clipper system moving across the Great Lakes, bringing some moderate snow that could develop into Michigan, maybe even parts of the Adirondacks. This system will continue to move off the New England coast tomorrow. And we're talking about even some light to moderate lake effect snow that can develop, where we see those higher bands of precipitation that can develop in that area. And we do have that cold air in the Northeast. 16 million people are being impacted over the Midwest into parts of the Ohio and the Tennessee River Valley with those freeze watches, frost advisory this morning. Temperatures in the 30s in Pittsburgh, Detroit. We're also talking about temperatures in New York and Washington, D.C. in the 40s. So that colder than average temperature will continue today into tomorrow, perhaps even colder than today. And then some April warmth will start to move into the area with temperatures that will slowly climb up. And in fact, next week, most of the country will be hopefully enjoying warmer than average temperatures across the country.
Bring those to New York.
Yes, so we're expecting 80s possibly next week.
There you go. Love it. Okay, thanks so much. Well, the newest queens of the court have been crowned in this year's NCAA tournament. The UCLA Bruins have won their very first women's championship on college basketball's biggest stage. They shocked the nation by blowing out South Carolina 79-51 yesterday afternoon. It was total domination from the very start. UCLA took an early first quarter lead and never trailed the Gamecocks once the entire game. The Bruins were led by a roster of senior superstars who combined to score every point of their final two games. That includes Lauren Betts, who was named the tournament's most outstanding player. On the men's side, the national championship game between UConn and Michigan is scheduled for tonight in Indianapolis, but I bet you already knew that.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.